so we're going to finish up here with our last presentation for the day. Barry Kimball is going to talk about pixel tracking and how it's used and abused. So it should be a pretty interesting talk. Barry's worked with computers the majority of his life, as probably most of us. Maybe you started a lot earlier, huh? So I started when I was a wee little lad. No, I'm not. No. Anyways, I studied materials and engineering, computer engineering. Worked through how and what makes a chip work all the way to programming. So you know hardware and software, huh? That's pretty good. Sadly, no, that's the cool part, yeah. So he's worked in several fields of IT and wider range of industries. He's running the Cincinnati SMBA and member of several local security groups in the Cincinnati area. So again, we have another Cincinnati rep here to help us out for our conference this year, but again, pixel tracking and how it's used and abused.
We're not in Cincinnati?
No, we're not in Cincinnati. We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. All right. There you go. Let's welcome Barry.
Everybody hear me all right? All righty. Well, thanks for coming out, guys, and you know, for those that are still conscious and survived so far, we'll give this a little run and see what you guys think. Feel free to chime in. This has been a talk that's been kind of evolving over a few years, so feel free to inject and might get added, and it may be spoken again sometime. So pixel tracking, what we're going to cover, and can't see anything, so step out here a little bit more, I guess. So we're going to cover what a pixel is, how they've been used, and how they've been abused and seen attacks, and then some of the things you can do to help mitigate some of the information that you give to the world caused by them. Of course, I'm Barry Kimball. I have certs from a lot of letters that people probably, well, there's a few people in the room that probably remember some of the things, but the original MCSE or, something called Sun, I did, my first stuff was Novell, if anybody remembers that world.
Yes.
Oh, yes, my favorite protocol. But we'll go ahead and head on. So what a pixel stands for, basically, it's the element for what makes up the picture on the screen, right? So it's usually the little square. The screen's a whole bunch of little dots. The little dots can be used for a wide range of different things over the years. But it came into use in 1965, was its first existence in print. There was a bunch of people working on the moon project. Said that it was in use for a couple years there in discussions as shorthand for pictures and the quality of pixelation and stuff for how well the cameras could take images of the moon for the moon landing project. Just for interesting history and fun facts. Properties of the pixel, those include for RGB, which is the red, green, blue numbers. And then there's the YGB or the CY or CMYK, the wacky stuff. Now I've never seen anybody actually utilize it, but was on some of the TVs there for several years. So mostly pixels are used in the world of HTML, of course, is the biggest effect that the world sees, and these are some of how to make a pixel call in HTML, and you can see that these are different ways in the code in which they hide the pixel for the purposes of embedding their website with tracking technology, ability, so that when you visit the website, this will reach out to the world and try to request a non-existent image in order to purposes of logging that you visited the website, right? And also it can return queries to your browser of whatever it particularly wants to do, because the browser doesn't really care whether it sends back a picture or not, so it can request from your computer a lot more information than just what the picture it was originally requesting, but it by default automatically gives that target location your IP address. some of the first uses originally were, anybody who was in the world of HTML1, it was a great way to count how many times somebody visited your page, or be able to restrict, just so you could do an accurate page counter. So, people were interested in that kind of information back in the ancient days. Like, can you get, 10 people to visit your website randomly from wherever in the world? I used to run a little script to keep track of all the different countries. Fun stuff. But some of the uses today, it's expanded substantially. Of course, in web pages, it's expanded into email advertising. It allows companies to target and better make money. And some people in recent years have even figured out ways to weaponize the ability of what a pixel can do for them. So some of the things to know, of course, that every browser knows about are capable of querying your system or whatever when you use a web browser is your IP, your previous sites, how fast your internet is, your operating system browser plugins, hardware specs. It gets actually kind of crazy what all they can query for. Your CPU, video resolution, battery level, the orientation of your device, like iPads, tablets, cell phones. Of course, give away geolocation, GPS. They can also do autofill for purposes of login. One thing that really took me by surprise is your web browser will expose what sites you stay logged into. So if you're into social media like Facebook and Twitter, or, Amazon, Microsoft, you have the option to stay logged in the background. All those are visible to any website that you visit. And they can query against that and ask for what credentials you're actually logged into, so they can use that to track you as you visit different sites. That profile stands out, right? So if I know your CPU and how much RAM and your resolution, and you're logged into these 7 sites, it helps them track where you are. So they say if I visit Amazon and I hop over here to Yahoo or go over to Google, they can pin together the profile of your machine from all that recorded data. Some of the reasons and places used for pixels, of course, the traffic analytics is, the big thing, selling who's visiting what you're doing along that ways. Direct marketing, if you're selling ads to a particular area, you don't want to sell Hardee's in a commercial into a non-Hardee's environment, right? So you want to target the cities where you want to promote your sales, Spam costs for like email tracking, it gives back information, who's opening your webs or your emails and such. And another interesting thing I found out was the document usage. If you want to track whether your users are actually doing their jobs and working on the documents that they should be, you can tag your documents, and every time they open a document, Microsoft Word, and its infinite joy, likes to pass on any telemetry that you'd like to record in Word documents. Most Microsoft Suite auto passes pixel tracking with no qualms. So, like I said, in the world of email, several companies have sprung up over the last several years that allow for email marketing tracking capabilities. Like I said, there's companies like Yesware, Banana Tag, Streak. There's probably about 7 or 8 other that have become pretty popular over the years too. So if you wanted to do a mass marketing email for your company, these companies step in and tag all your emails so that when they visit, they can say, hey, your worker, they sent out these emails to these companies and these amount of people opened them. It's very interesting. Like I said, online spies, I imagine most everybody in this room is pretty familiar just how bad different companies are spying upon us. Of course, between the Amazon and Apple, Facebook and Google. There's some information on the slide there if you guys wanted to read through. But the couple information that's kind of interesting is most of them have made publicly available how much telemetry they've collected on you. So like at the bottom of there is this Google, you go to your account and that website, and it'll tell you what they've collected on you. There's some more later in my slide deck too for, I believe, Facebook, and Amazon has one as well. It's a little bit more complicated to get to, but so some of the things that I found is dark side of the pixels is how people are abusing them. Of course, there's the malware tracking, banner infections, stereographic attacks, phishing, attack information, the Word documents also, Microsoft automatically passing information, script execution queries, many different ways to collect the information, of course. But one thing I thought was really interesting is the malware, some of the more recent malware is utilizing, they can track the spreading of their malware based on passing those like pixel calls throughout the systems as they infect it, so that each one queries out. It's kind of basically it's beaconing. For people familiar with web beacons, and when I was first putting this together, it was probably a month or two before this report came out, but one of our big things I had been discussing with somebody was that in a cloud environment is who are you providing the information to on your documents, right? If somebody gets into your cloud environment and was able to tag your documents, now they are receiving telemetry whenever you open your cloud documents, right? So, who's that information going to? Is it your own company providing that data, or was it somebody else has gotten into your documents? And CloudPoint actually had put out a warning that they were starting to see attacks where people were placing pixels, and that gives an adversary, right, the information of who's opening the documents, what users, accessing it, what their IP addresses are, what their computer names are. It's giving them a little bit more of a background information of your site through the cloud. I would think from a risk standpoint, that's, you're providing more phishing information for them to better craft. If I know Sue in HR opens this document every day on Monday, then, for different job postings or whatnot, that would be something I would want to watch. Or, somebody in the accounting documents, you find out who works in the different departments that aren't necessarily publicly available information if you get access to their cloud documents repertoire. Up till about a year and a half ago, Microsoft didn't really care too much, despite people complaining for over a decade. But in the last couple of years, they've started taking pixels in their documents a little bit more seriously. For example, it's not as easy to place anymore. You need a third-party tool to inject them now, but you can still do it. But up until about a year ago, which was well before I originally started on this, but and they say some of the different things that they can pull from your documents, but the fact that Microsoft is starting to realize that they're kind of liable for giving away some of that information by passing it automatically, right? Or they don't want to be on the hook for it. But there was a Trojan being passed around in Office 365 via pixel call and documents, and where they advised that, if you start pulling documents down locally, it'll view them in protected mode to prevent those calls from being made, so that information's not passed outside. So some of the other kind of weird attacks that have been over the last few years, there was a couple of attacks through Flash utilizing UNIF and Ramit, which were different styles of attack. One was a backdoor, allowed them to view your screen. The other ones was targeting the bank. One of the ones I found pretty interesting is Countly, which is a form of JavaScript people were modifying real heavily to circumvent antivirus and detection because the JavaScript is so scrambled, it doesn't trick any of the previous scan algorithms or hashes. So then that allowed for them to spin up things for like stereographic attacks and actually pass the payloads through pictures, which we'll cover here in a few moments. Of course, JavaScript and AdThink and non-audience were a script data mining injection, which allowed a query to where they'd start checking what other sites you use in the background and kind of download your hashes from your web browser if you stored your password in the browser. And I at least gave them the hash which they could run against because it would auto-submit, but you don't realize it's occurring when you visit the website. This is an attack that I think happened about, probably about a year and a half ago. It was a very small run. The personnel that found this, it was targeting a bank in South Korea, but it only affected about 180 computer or handheld devices. The people think that the people we're working on accidentally let it slip out of their network, or that we're building the tool because the tool wasn't completely finished. But what was kind of freaky about it is that it was utilizing, if anybody's familiar, what's on the right side of the, your right side of the screen for you guys, in the world of graphics. What that is, familiar with what that is in the world of graphics? Anybody?
Arena song.
So it's a transparency pixel. So instead of just doing a pixel, they're doing an entire image overlaid the login screen in which they could record taps on the device and have an XY coordinate. Now, of course, it wasn't completely finished, but it was collecting data, but it wasn't doing anything with it. So like if, when you clicked on there to put in your login, your device will usually pop up a keyboard. So then they have the XY coordinates. They could go back and map, kind of like a virtual keylogger through digital screen. Which is, stuff people are evidently working on because it hasn't been seen since, but it's been a little bit over a year since the initial outbreak of whatever it was they were working on. We mentioned the stereographic attack. What's interesting about this is, probably several of you are familiar with it, but each picture has the RGB for normal pictures or whatever. All those pixels are in binary, right? So you have 255 for green, 255 for red, and 255 for blue, and you can manipulate the last 2 bits without actually affecting the colors enough for most people to realize that that data has been manipulated. So malware or code can be added to a picture and be your actual payload on a website, which actually was utilized pretty recently. In late November, Confit and Malwarebytes started seeing a large uptick in an attack that they didn't understand what was causing all the traffic, but they managed to trace it down. This little white bar on the top left of the screen there is carrying a malware payload, which once it was decrypted or converted from base 64 back to an open SSL decrypted, and then removed another base 64, and then reversed the ASCII, or the hex to ASCII was source code that actually activated and downloaded the payload for a Trojan backdoor that was spreading on a website and affected primarily Mac devices and Apple. It hit roughly 5 million users on January 7th, I believe. So it was like one of the more successful stereographic attacks that's been seen. And then that's some of the source code in the bottom of what it looked like. And then the hash, or like the base 64 decrypted, and then the secondary payload, where it actually went out and grabbed the code. Some of the options that you can do to try to circumvent some of the data collection on yourself from these various things, of course, is web browsers usually have an incognito mode nowadays that's not entirely foolproof any longer as more and more people develop. They still fingerprint enough of your computer that they can carry through. But using VPNs or Tor to help, at least get rid of your geolocation. Some of the things I thought I came across too is operating systems. Some are a little bit more versatile. As some of you here that work around WritePad are familiar with TENS, I assume. It's an operating system actually created here at WritePad that is a RAM-only operating system. It's very nice for being able to use any device or any desktop PC or laptop that you can boot up, and you have no access to the actual hardware structure. The operating system runs entirely out of RAM, so there leaves no artifacts, or in that part, the website your browsers can't query against because you have no access to the physical hardware other than the RAM drive that it's operating out of. Tails and some other versions of Linux distros that have been built for try to obfuscate what you're doing on the web. Some email plugins. Thunderbird's one of the nicer email utilities, ironically, because Outlook doesn't care. Outlook automatically passes all pixel tracks. There's a plugin for Chrome if anybody uses Chrome as your email browser, Ugly Mail. And then some other plugins. Now for Chrome Firefox, people that are, of course, Mac users are probably familiar with that Safari, starting with High Sierra and introduced intelligence tracking prevention, which was become a real big deal over the last several years, in that Facebook lost a lot of revenue due to the fact that they couldn't trace Mac or give ads to Mac users because Safari auto filters out their ads, which of course Facebook has recently retaliated, and we'll cover that here in a few moments. But there's another ad blocker I've really enjoyed up until last week was uBlock Origin, if anybody's familiar with it. It was a very powerful tool. But Google has decided to start targeting third-party app blockers, and it's kind of not working so well in the last 2 weeks due to some of the changes done to Chrome. So some of the controversy, of course, is because you are blocking the ads, various websites and companies don't prefer to allow you to view their website since they're not making revenue off you, all right? Anybody here ever visit Forbes? So when I first started building and trying out some of these various tools, I found it very interesting that Forbes would sell your data to 88 different vendors just by hitting the home page. So I wish I had the idea at the time to have taken screenshots of that, because they have since masked what's visible, but they had a really nasty gram for using ad blockers at the time, which at 88 I thought was a little extreme myself. But I said, and then there's a local channel there. But so Thunderbird has the built-in options. Here's the settings for the security, and then you'll get these little, when you know that the app has or your email has a pixel block in it, get these little boxes with the little square broken GIF files, basically, where they're not able to make the phone home. In this case, this particular email had 2 of them. The most I've seen is actually 8 in one email. Through Ugly Mail.
Like a hypertext, like if you were to look at the email in non-HTML format,
would that show up?
Is that a link there, or?
Yeah, so there's probably, I was thinking, I've never really dissected into the email that heavily because it's gotten so convoluted in being able to actually have access to the raw email, at least from the tools I just use Chrome. And Thunderbird's kind of archaic if you're used to familiar. It's not very robust.
Well, because I know in Outlook, a lot of times you have the option of displaying
the raw media.
The raw, and it's just text only, and so then instead of the actual image coming through, it's a.
You should see the HTML link with the.
And a lot of times you look at it, and if you read it all the way across, there's a little section that says Tracker ID.
Does it?
And it continues on to whatever. Mm-hmm. I was just curious if where you had a 2 red on the right side there, if it had something similar to that, if you had looked into that at all.
That I did not with Thunderbird. Like I said, I primarily I used to use Thunderbird several years ago. I kind of liked it from the fact that it wasn't Outlook, right? But at the same time, it's not Outlook.
Right.
And then the real problem is it doesn't do exporting. So if you change computers, you can't re-import your mail. At least at the time. I don't know if it's gotten better over the last couple of years, but if you're, the fact that it had built-in security features, none of the other ones do that. For the purposes of tracking, it's the only browser that does, or at least as of last year when I was digging through that part. But yeah, as I say, because Thunderbird's a little bit more primitive on viewing stuff in raw mode's a little harder to do. It might be in there buried somewhere. I didn't spend a whole lot of time digging into, like I said, Thunderbird as well as I did with Outlook. But like I said, Outlook, I would assume, gives you an HTML link. This is what Ugly Mail looks like. It'll put a little I in front of all the titles for your email, so that you're aware that if you open that you're going to trigger a response. There was another one, I don't know if I had it written down, but there was a Pixel something. It'll give you a little red one, and it'll actually let you, it won't activate it, so you can actually go into the email and then see what they are. Ghostery is an interesting product. Ghostery, due to the fact that nobody really bought the app or pays for it as a plugin for your browsers, they still do sell your information, but they anonymize it. Everybody likes that information, right? Well, so they're like saying, so instead of saying, hey, user so-and-so visited said site, they say, allegedly, 50 people used this site today, right? So they don't actually pass on, depending on, they give you a breakdown of, which one do you want to allow, right? Which is kind of interesting. So you can track and see which of the different analytics sites are collecting the data when you visit a site, and you can whitelist whatever sites you want. But they're still trying to make money as well, so they're trying to stay afloat. They openly admit now that they sell your information, but they strip out your personal informations and stuff and give a general, collection of data, I guess, to the different companies. PixelBlock, this is what I was talking about. I didn't know if I still had a slide left, but so it gives you the little red mark in it, and then you can see and highlight who it's beaconing out to or whatever if you open it, and you can actually go ahead and click it. The source, so in cases where there's more than one, it'll give you a list of the sources, and you can check mark if you want to actually go ahead and send that pixel. Why you might want to do that is if you're signed up for ads like Fry's or Micro Center or something like that, they don't know you're actually opening those ads, right? Because now you're blocking that tracker. So if you like to continue to receive those ads or their discounts or their whatever, you kind of have to make an extra step to go ahead and say, yeah, go ahead and let them know that I opened this, if anybody likes their free coupons from Micro Center, I'm a fan of free USB sticks, so I occasionally click a couple of those and let them go through, I think I missed one there. And this is what uBlock Origin looks like. puts the little shield up top. You can got an on and off button. You can also whitelist what sites you want to make available to pass your information, and then it'll give you a running count number of every site that particular page hit count of how many trackers are on that actual site. Sometimes those get really large. If you're a big fan of Xbox, visiting their ad sites for Xbox is ridiculous digits. I think just seeing about 485 over the course of visiting a Xbox advertisement page. Really nice. If you're using YouTube or something like that, you get no commercials or ads. It's worked really nice up until, like I said, from everything I've used it for, up until 2 weeks ago, it was a great product. It's still a decent product for free. You can't knock it. But I've noticed whatever the back ends that Chrome is doing, any pixels that are pictures that are smaller than like your little speaker logo are now like the little red X box we had a little bit ago. So like you can't tell what's your drop downs or what's your speaker control or your minimize. Like if you're visiting YouTube, like all your little controls are disappeared. I would assume that the people that help maintain this will eventually fix this, but also as a side effect, both Firefox and Chrome have confessed that they're not doing auto updates for ad blockers anymore. So if you want to continue to maintain your ad blockers, you have to manually update them yourself because they are preventing those from auto updating any longer as of about a month ago, as they are blaming speed, that the ad blockers are slowing down web traffic. Browsing, which, let's see, I got a slide there for that, I think here. Yeah, so their claims from Google, of course, is that the ad blockers are slowing down the web trafficking so much that it's not worth your time to have them and that they should build their own web blocker. So they, of course, Google will pass their own ads into their browser and block other people's ads. Here's some of the timestamps of a third party, the effects of some of these ad blockers. I can't quite see them from here, but Ghostery is pretty low. uBlock Origin, I mean, it's 1/100th of a second. I mean, I'll happily put up with 1/100th of a millisecond to not see any ads when I was visiting Facebook or YouTube or the like. But if you get into other browsers, like was it GoDuck or whatever, DuckDuckGo, it gets a little brutal. Those are, 8 seconds is a different story. You can understand that probably would deter you from using those. But let's back up here. So there's another guy that's done, or gal, I'm not sure, but the Robin Linus has done a lot of work and and really recommends NoScript as a tool to use in the background for blocking a lot of this material. What's neat about the site, and it was in the slide at the very end, but that you can actually visit their site and run tests on to see what kind of information is being passed from your network by browsing the internet, and it'll actually give you solutions for different things to plug. If you mostly NoScript will stop almost everything, but it'll at least give you an idea what kind of information you are leaking to the internet. One of the things I thought was, because I tried it out on one of my boxes for Cruds and Giggles, I let it run for like 20 minutes. It didn't find any of my PCs, but the fact that my TV is visible kind of took me off guard, because of course IoT devices aren't robust in security. So the fact that somebody could tell that I had a Samsung television just by visiting their website because it's on my network was kind of an interesting eye-opener. Apple devices, like I said, with the Safari and stuff like that, they have built in ad blocking. They call it limiting the ad tracking on their iPad and iPhone, and the settings to enable that. Privacy Badger, I've not personally used it yet, but it's pretty similar to uBlock Origin. You can do a white list, red list, or, you know, neutral, whether I'm not entirely sure what the yellow does, but some other things too. There's like pfSense Firewall builds a module that you can put in for Blocker NG, which will automatically block a lot of the pixel tracking calls. I played with it a little bit. I haven't spent a whole lot of time making it work, but there's an excellent document there for anybody who'd like to take that challenge. It's several pages long and very technical. I'm not a big pfSense, so it was kind of, but it keep you entertained for a weekend or two if you want to take a shot at it. So one of the things I came across too in recent, in later renditions of this, is some of the effects that Pixel is having on artificial intelligence, right? So, because that's a big thing now. But the fact that you can put a corrupt pixel in an image and it will affect the AI's ability to detect what that image is, right? So it'll cause them to misclassify just by a dot on the tire, and it changed from an automobile to a dog. You know, putting a dot on the dog changed it to a cat, you know, a horse to an automobile. And it's pretty interesting research. So like once they get to 3 corrupt pixels in a picture, most AI can't identify the image any longer. So that was interesting. So yeah, back in October, Facebook announced that they're no longer, they implemented what's called a Facebook Pixel, which basically is they're giving their third-party advertisers first right access to the data, so that all ads come through to the users as actual Facebook traffic instead of a third-party app. They've cut back how much ads they throw at you, but the fact that now means that if a third-party ad has malware in it, that Facebook is passing it to you, and there's, you know, outside your browser or your AV, you know, I think it's kind of an interesting response in order to catalog and regain the revenue from Mac OS operating systems. And of course, I'm sure they probably have something negotiated with Google implementing their own ad blocker. I thought it was very interesting too. I don't know if anybody saw last month, but Google started putting ads on their homepage, which I had never seen before, which has kind of bothered me as well, because I always went to Google as the browser because there's no ads, and now they're starting to put an ad in the bottom. So, but the fact that they're giving first-party access to everything, they're be able to, it means their third party can trace and fingerprint your computer just as you visited their own website. And these were the plugin slowdowns. More recently, this was, I don't know how many weeks back though, Matt turned me on to this a couple days ago. A gentleman, Joe Chasinga, he has created a new tool called Subhuman, which scans your system for incoming pixel calls and then anonymizes and bombards that site with several thousand calls from around the world, querying that email pixel track. Found as an interesting solution to, you know, mess with people that are, you know, tracking you on the back end on your emails. I read through some of his material a couple days ago, or last night, or yesterday morning, or whatever. A lot of people saying, "Well, aren't you kind of DDoSing these ads?" And he's like, the same way that, you know, his response, of course, was, "Well, we didn't ask to be tracked in the first place, so, you know, which ground are you me hitting them with 3,000 different random places from around the world, you know, to obscure, you know, where I opened your actual email."
So that is kind of doing a DDoS to them, the trackers.
Well, yeah, it's not as much as like, okay, so your email advertisers wanting to know when you open the email. So when you open the email, his subhuman will hit that thing with like 2,000 or 3,000 hits from random places on the web.
So it kind of masquerades where you're coming from.
Yeah, so it's saying, hey, instead of getting one response with the information you're trying to track, I'm giving you 5,000 copies of me opening that email every time I open that email. AHA is a very amusing thing. It's a fairly new GitHub. There's the address on the bottom if anybody wants to take a look at the work. It's kind of an interesting concept to start poking back at. People doing the pixel tracking and everything that we're doing, and these were some useful, interesting sites. I said EFF, Privacy Badgers, considered pretty good. That WebK Linus Pro, or Robin Linus, I'm sorry, that's was talking about they got like 8 different categories of different tests you can scan your system with. Of course, you're giving them permission to scan your system, right? So as much as you want to trust hitting a OK button on a random website on the internet, have at it. I said my stuff I don't care about too much, but it did find my television. So that was a kind of an eye-opener. And then places like, the analytics that Google and YouTube have collected on you, and Facebook. So you go to those sites while you're logged in, they'll show you what they've accumulated. So then the end. But if anybody's got any comments, suggestions, or questions, I'm always open.
Are these slides posted anywhere?
Paul's got them. I can send them out. I haven't personally gone and posted them anywhere. I think they're posted on mine from OISF.
We haven't posted them yet, but we can post them. We want to make sure we have permission to do so first. Sounds like we did.
Yeah, perfectly. I mean, it's.
So the other thing is got a couple of. Adrian has recorded these, and they will be on Iron Geek website.
Yep. So and also YouTube goes in mirror the BitChute. It'll be on archive.org. We can download them all probably sometime tomorrow.
Yeah. So last year they were up by the end of the day. Actually, I think you had them up before we finished the conference last year.
I don't have his talk up yet, of course.
Obviously, we're still
we're there now. Right now. When will then be now?
Can you go back one?
Oh, sure. So.
If I go to that bottom site, they track me.
Well, of course.
They already are tracking you. It just tells you what they're tracking about you.
Oh, that actually, there was one more thing I wanted to add on this, which was kind of interesting, but I forgot to look into it too much. But anybody see the article on LinkedIn this week about that they have so much telemetry on us that they can actually track us by our heartbeats? That everybody's heartbeat's so unique that they can actually trace where we are based off our heartbeats and the devices that can hear it.
That's a biometric thing.
Yeah. Thought that was wanted to dig into that a little bit more, but I meant to do that before today, but I forgot about it.
Question in the back.
Yeah. What's that?
What company is that?
Like I said, I didn't dig into the actual thing. There was an article on LinkedIn this past week that a friend had posted that they have collected so much intelligence on us that they can trace us and know where we are based on our heartbeat. That's a unique identifier that can be used to locate us, kind of similar to facial recognition. I wish I could tell you more about that. I was like, I just hit that in skimming, and I didn't dig into it as much as I wanted to, but I thought, you guys might be interested in hearing about it. But I'm sure there's a few articles up on various websites by now because it was posted like Monday or Tuesday. Give you something to look at. Would you want to ask, Jan?
Yeah. Just
tell us your opinion about just simply using, just scrapping all conventional browser and using Tor. To which extent it's first of all usable and should likely resolve problem for good.
Yeah, so I'm guessing what you're trying to say, how easy it would be to completely cover your tracks of what you're doing, visiting the internet. From a few various people I've talked to, if you actually wanted to do something anonymously on the internet, you need a computer that you don't use exclusively for that particular purpose, preferably a burner laptop that you don't actually plug into anywhere other than your Tor connection. And use public Wi-Fi and tunnel somewhere else in the world, and because it's going to fingerprint that machine enough that companies like Google or Microsoft are going to be able to pull serial numbers or MAC addresses or off that device to such a point that it doesn't really matter what you do after the first day.
They will not be able to pixel track. Yeah, sure.
Right. So once they I've had a friend show me, like, once you plug something into the computer in like 10 or 15 minutes, there's a like Google token on your device that lets them know and fingerprinted you. So once you've got that token, once you put your name or some personal information into it, it's going to be tied to that token, and that token will be paired with anything else that you've used.
And you're done.
Yeah, so I mean, once you put your name in the browser, bam, that's tied to you. I personally have somewhere in the ballpark of 50-some computers, which is a little abnormal, but to the fact that, my ability to obscure that is probably really hard. Because I go out and most of mine are all in one place, but it does make for an interesting way of trying to surf the net anonymously. You pretty much have to have a device dedicated for that, that you put zero information into, I would think, at this point.
Any more questions for Barry? No? All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.